The truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off.
Hey! These are dogs attacking children. These are people being fire hosed.
The difference now is somebody can hold up one of these, get what's going on, they can put it on YouTube, and the whole world has to deal with it. That's what's new. It's not the protest, it's not the brutality, it's the fact that we can force a conversation about it.
It is the only time thousands of white people are cheering for a black kid to win is in a stadium. It is you looking at me crazy if I told you to go back to Europe even though we didn't have a say and your great-grandparents came here voluntarily. It is you all of a sudden having a problem with immigration like this isn't even your nation. How the hell do you discover some shit that wasn't even missing to begin with? You Columbus contradictions. Got white girls twerking in high definition with multicolored nails and purple hair, but it was ghetto when we did it. Oh, am I making you uncomfortable?
Missing someone.
Talk about white privilege. Let's talk about anti-racism. Let's talk about all the bad things that have led to systematic oppression. Let's talk about white privilege. Oh yeah, that's so cringy. Hello Stardust and welcome back to Radical.Raspberry, where I make videos every single Friday about holistic health and self-improvement. Thumbs up this video if you enjoyed because that helps me out, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. If you want to live a more holistic life, you have to understand other people's struggles and other issues that are happening within the world. You can't just be blind to that and just so consumed in your own life. You gotta open up that consciousness and see that we are all collective. After reflecting in these past days and thinking about how my awareness of white privilege has evolved, I think the beginning was in elementary school. Now, when I was really young, I didn't have any concept of what white privilege is because I didn't have to. Then I remember going over to one of my friend's house and seeing certain things that she would do that I never had to worry about. And I remember her worrying about her hair, straightening it every single day, or that it was like too curly and too long and essentially not fitting that white image of beauty. I never had or have to worry about straightening my hair to fit these European beauty ideals. She worried about that so much, and I just remember that shaking me. That would be kind of one of the first things where I was confronted with my white privilege. Moving forward into high school, I took equity classes, so I learned more about the term privilege, and I thought I was comfortable with acknowledging my white privilege and like knowing what it is. I almost felt like after high school, like, okay, I acknowledged my white privilege, I'm done with it, I can like put it in a box on the top shelf and like move on with my life. I didn't do anything, nothing differently, because I'm not fronted with my skin color every single day. It's only until now recently that I've become a lot more aware of my white privilege. I've become a lot more aware of prejudices and biases that I have within myself, and I think that's a big thing that people don't talk about enough, in my opinion, is that like we all tend to hold like racist opinions and ideas in our own subconscious minds, and it's hard not to when the whole world has been conditioning us to say, okay, this is what it means to be black, and this is what it means to be white, and this is what it means to be brown, and this is what it means to be whatever. That's been my story and my experience with acknowledging my white privilege and coming to terms with it. First off, to clarify what white privilege is, I think we have to clarify what white privilege is not. A lot of white people, when the word white comes up, they feel these great feelings of discomfort because we're not used to being defined by our race. Then the word privilege comes up and people who may be poor are like, what? How do I have privilege? I'm poor. The whole notion of white privilege does not mean that you do not struggle, okay? Because you struggle, you suffer, you're a human being. You have unfortunately signed this contract with humanity that creates suffering. Naturally, that's just how life works. Where there is life, there is suffering, regardless of your skin color. Having white privilege does not mean that you do not suffer. Instead, it means that you don't suffer because of your race. I can think of so many struggles I've lived through my life. None of them have to do with my race. I've never had to feel fear walking outside because I'm a white person. You get what I mean? So it's like you're struggling. I hear ya, but your struggles are not attributed to your race. Also, white privilege is not the assumption that everything a white person has earned is somehow only because of their skin color and that they did not work for it. You probably did work for your position, and I am sure that you worked hard to accomplish what you have. But being white, there is this built-in advantage because you didn't have to overcome systematic oppression. That's one less thing you had to work hard to accomplish whatever it is that you've accomplished. To recap, white privilege does not mean that you do not struggle, and it does not mean that that you have not worked hard for what you have in your life. Thirdly, something that I feel the need to add is when we hear white privilege, we often hear white guilt, which is something that I've experienced, something that I've talked about with other people, and I think is a reason why people are hesitant to acknowledge their white privilege, because they start feeling guilty, which is such a victim state that it's not going to help anybody, but I think it's natural to feel those feelings of guilt. But one more thing that white privilege is it's not something to be ashamed about. I think this young boy says it better than I can possibly say it, so I'm just going to put that clip here.
But in reality, I'm not ashamed at all, and nobody should be ashamed about their race, because that's an uncontrollable thing. I was born this way. There's no reason to be ashamed of that.
Just as people of color did nothing to deserve unequal treatment, white people also didn't do anything to deserve this, special treatment. It's simply something that we cannot control. White privilege is a byproduct of systematic racism and bias. The term white privilege wasn't really used before civil rights, so it started in civil rights, but it was more defined under systematic and legal legislation. It had more to do with the right to vote, to buy property, to be seen as equal under the law. That definition seemed a bit outdated. It just was too simple. So this woman, this American activist named Peggy McIntosh, I don't know, she came up with a new definition for what white privilege is, which I'm going to read you. Peggy began to view white privilege as being more psychological, a subconscious prejudice perpetuated by white people's lack of awareness that they held this power. White privilege could be found in day-to-day transactions and in white people's ability to move through the professional and personal world with relative ease. So that is a lot more expanded, and that's why I say we are all racist in a certain way, which might be a really whoa statement to say, but I'm just saying with all of this conditioning and programming, it's hard to escape these subconscious prejudices that we may hold. The issue with Peggy's statement is that she completely made it seem like nobody is conscious of their choices of being prejudiced and biased. She really just threw it all on subconscious biases and psychological happenings. But a lot of people of color noted how white privilege is also manifested through choices, through conscious choices of specifically people in power who tend to just choose then other white people who look like them, could be a comfort level, there's other psychological biases going on, but that's a conscious choice, right? We make conscious choices to not speak up. White privilege is a combination of subconscious biases as well as conscious choices. Younger, I was never affronted with my own white privilege, as you don't have to be. The reason you don't have to be aware of your white privilege is because whiteness is sort of the default. There's this thing called normal, which is seen as whiteness. So there are certain examples that you would not have to question because the world caters to your whiteness. Some examples, one that I did not acknowledge at all until recently was that Band-Aid color. What's a Band-Aid color? Skin color. It matches my skin color and assumes that this is the normal skin color. I even think growing up with the Crayola packages, you'd be like, pass me the skin color, which would be peach rather than black, because that would be the default of what skin color means. So little examples like that, I could see how it's manifested at such a young age. I don't know if kids will do that, they probably do, but it's like, pass me the skin color. You're like, which one though? There's a spectrum. So white privilege is upheld through the power of normal. Another example would just be simply hair products. You go into the hair aisle, you're probably going to see hair products that are catered to white people, but if you want to get hair products for somebody of African descent or with curly hair, you're gonna have to go into the ethnic aisle. The same is for food, right? There's the assumption of what is normal is white food. If you want to find food that is closer to your culture, you're gonna have to go to the ethnic aisle or the international aisle. A big thing in my eyes, and what I've talked about at the beginning, is how the media morphs our world, is the representation through media. Normally the main characters are white people. You don't really see any black people until probably the last 10 years, and it would be one or two characters. Just imagine if the main characters were black people and there was just one white person in all of the TV shows that you've watched. That would be strange, because you're not used to that, obviously, but it would also make you feel like you're not represented and that you don't really matter and you've been pushed to the curb, which is exactly what has been happening to people of color for centuries and centuries and centuries. privilege. Another example of white privilege, I would think, as a little kid, looking at all the dolls, looking at Barbie, all of them are white. White standards, that's the power of normal. All of the toys that I had as a kid were white. All the books, the picture books that I read were white kids, and those are easily accessible. I didn't have to search and search for a book of a little white girl, because that is what is normal. These are all more easily digestible examples for people, but in reality, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I don't know about you, but I was never sat down at a young age and taught to completely comply if I was pulled over by police officers. I don't know about you, but my mom didn't constantly hear whenever I went out walking or just walking to school or for a run. I don't know about you, but when I walk in a store, I feel relatively safe. I don't know about you, but when a police car is riding beside me, I don't get an instant fear in my gut. That is all white privilege. Little things are going to sprinkle over into things like internalized racism, but moreover, they also contribute to this idea of seeing black people as the other, seeing them as lesser, and then when they are represented in the media, it's typically as criminals, so then we attribute people of color with being criminal, and when they're criminalized, their individuality is compromised, and we don't see them as a person anymore. We see people of color as just criminals because they are always portrayed in chains. Learning a lot about this, a lot of the rap lyrics that I listen to have just like they've stood out to me before. Now I understand them on a completely different level. I didn't know much about mass incarceration before, but it is spoken about in a lot of rap music. So after I watched the documentary 13th, I was like, oh, everything that these guys have been rapping about makes way more sense. One line that always stood out to me before I watched that documentary is, the only time you see us, we be in the news in chains. I remember hearing that and being like, that's some real shit though. Leading on that representation of people of color in the media as criminals, that also means they're less likely to have a fair trial. They're less likely to be represented in more of a fair light. There was this campaign that went around called #IfTheyGunned-Me-Down, and this was a campaign regarding many of the people of color's lives who have been killed by police brutality. The pictures that they showed in the media are normally them where they're looking more thuggish, which then in our heads is somehow connected to being criminal. And then again, you're depersonifying, I think that's the word. I don't know, you're looking at them like less than a person, than just a criminal. And so then in your minds you might think, well, that's just. No, it's not. In the media, white people are more likely to be represented in a fair manner, shown through these pictures. I can link it down below of other examples of this campaign. So yeah, it might start in you don't have representation in a grocery store of certain products you may need to use, but that trickles over to you not being seen as normal, to you being criminalized if you are a person of color. Can you see where the issue here is yet? So to me, white privilege is being able to have a more fair trial. Just imagine all of that indoctrination of seeing certain people in certain images, what attitudes you're going to approach when you meet a person of color if all you've ever seen them as is painted as criminals. So then those stereotypes and biases and inner prejudices will come up when a person of color is looking for a job. They're going to be less likely to get that job because typically the white employer has this power dynamic. White privilege is having the luxury to step outside and walk through your day-to-day world without being worried of being oppressed or discriminated against because of your skin color. Colonization, slavery, these are the building blocks of the society that we are living in today. If the foundation is corrupt, everything that builds on it is also going to be corrupt. So that's how systematic racism occurs, is since whiteness has been the foundation of our institutions, our school systems, our government, our way of living, that is the foundation of the society that we live here in the Western world. Everything that stems from that is going to have these biases and these prejudices that continuously put people in color in an oppressive position. Now that you've made it this far, you likely are feeling things. I hope so, because you are a human being, and we like to feel things. We don't like to feel them, we just feel them. It's part of the experience. You might be feeling mad, sad, guilty, resistant. There's going to be a lot of emotions coming to the surface, and that's good. It means that this is hitting home with you a little more. But don't just sit there and feel bad and then do what I did when I was younger, putting it in the closet and walking away to your day-to-day. Because right there, that's white privilege. Your ability to not get involved involved in politics is privilege, because you can be silent because you're not being oppressed, right? Like, the only reason why you can be silent and not get political is because you don't have to deal with every single day living in fear of people oppressing you, discriminating you, dealing with shit that you just don't have to deal with that because you're white, because I'm white. I don't have to deal with that. That's just the system that we've set up here. So instead of feeling those things and then just being like, oh, but this is how it is, which I definitely felt that, there are things you can do. For one, you watch this video, which, like, I want to give you like a virtual hug, because that means that you are taking the initiative to educate yourself on these injustices that are happening day to day. And for me, that's a really big point, is just educating myself, because you're not going to be able to have a lot of those conversations with other white people if you don't know the facts yourself. So in this video, I did try to speak from my own experience, so that I hope it doesn't come off like I am speaking for people of color. So taking that mentality when you are talking to your friends and family and just other white people you know, make sure you're not speaking for people of color, for black people. I encourage you to steer the conversation more to talking about whiteness and what whiteness has done throughout the centuries systematically. I'll link the articles that I've referenced down below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to thumbs it up and comment down below hashtag Black Lives Matter, and don't forget to share this video with your friends and family who you think will benefit from it, who can learn more about white privilege. Open those dialogues, people. It may be uncomfortable, but it is important. Thank you again for watching. We've done a lot of great work so far, so never stop educating yourself, and I will see you next Friday. As always, don't forget to think beyond, and sending you peace and love. May you be well, may you be at ease, may you be happy.